How's it going, everyone? And in this video, I'm going to be talking about what makes medical school so challenging for me right now. And so we're almost about a month in, and the most difficult class that I'm in is anatomy. And the reason that it's so hard is that you have, and we're working with real human cadavers, not 3D models. What makes it so difficult is the variation in every single human being. And so on your cadaver, you very well might be able to identify the brachioradialis, and if you walk over to the next cadaver, you're gonna be like, what? Like, where is this thing? So much of anatomy is just dependent on you being there and memorizing these things and seeing it again and again and again and again until 10 p.m. at night. And so that's what makes it so challenging and rough. There's the course load on top of all this stuff, like the didactic exam type deal. That's just a fancy way of saying like the normal stuff you're used to in undergrad of like, you're gonna get a quiz, A, B, C, D, like which enzyme, is catalyzing this reaction, whatever. But all that's on top of this whole anatomy thing of like, you're supposed to just become an expert in every single muscle, vein, artery, nerve in the arm, and you're supposed to understand the ways in which the brachial plexus has all these different, trunks, cords, branches, divisions, all in this little area right here that like divide and merge and divide again and merge again and divide. And it's just like, there's just this craziness that you have to wrap your head around and remember. And on the exams, you're going to walk up to any one of I think we've got about 30 cadavers, and there's just going to be these pins where they stick this thing through a particular, artery or vein or nerve, and it's your job to know exactly what that is based on all the landmarks around it. So it's not just looking at a picture in that one little picture in that one crop. It's looking at all these features from everywhere you see, and sometimes you got to work all the way back from a landmark that is way farther up that, you do know, and you can like chase it and hopefully you've remembered enough to get to that point. But it's just extremely challenging, and every single day, like you're supposed to spend at least 3 hours just reviewing this content and as much time as you can in the lab, just looking at more bodies to figure out, if someone pinned this particular artery or vein, like what is it? And how do you know that? And you're not allowed to touch anything. You're not allowed to take pictures of anything. And so, the ways that I've been approaching this and the ways that I think successful students have done this in the past, and I'm definitely having a hard time right now, but it is to go through and draw everything from memory, and to just keep going back into lab, to keep looking at these structures, because it's not just enough to get like a picture memorized or to draw something from memory. Like you need to be able to think about it in 3D space, and how, everything depends on orientation too, because you'll walk up to a cadaver and they're going to cover a lot of the body because they need to keep it moist on these practical exams. And so what you're going to see, you don't, sometimes it'll be difficult to even figure out, is this arm currently pronated or is it supinated? And is this the right or the left arm? And so, because you don't know if the body's facing this way or that way, because there's just bags everywhere. So it's like, you just got to be able to like go in, figure out landmarks, and just be ready to just, identify a structure. And, there's just like all these degrees that you jump from this to this, this, to this, to eventually realize that that must be that. And one of the professors today was telling me that like, there's people in there who are fantastic at dissecting. Like they do beautiful dissections. You could put the pictures in textbooks, but they fail the actual exams and the practicals because they don't know any of the landmarks. So it's like, you might be able to dissect great. That's not the point of anatomy. The point of anatomy is to be able to reference landmarks and know where all these landmarks are and be able to orient yourself very, very quickly, so that when you're exposed to something on an exam, you're able to immediately identify the pronator teres minor, and then from there you know that you're going to have this layout of muscles superficially with the with a bunch of these other names. And it's just like, I'm still working on trying to remember all this stuff, and it's just very, very intense. And So it's a lot to take in, and it feels like there's no break. And that to me is honestly one of the biggest personal challenges I have with med school right now, is that there are no breaks. You might think that like, oh, it's Friday, like today is Friday, and it's like, oh, does that mean I finally get to relax and, kick back and like just, take some time for myself and go to the beach and just chill? It's like, no, you are supposed to be studying because you've got an exam on Monday and Wednesday that you better be ready for. And if you fail these things, you're going to have to figure out how you're going to make up for that while you're keeping up with the other material that you're supposed to be learning too. So it's just an insane amount of stuff that you got to be taking in. And it's like, they keep saying like, it's not, it's like these things, they're not complicated. They're not problems to solve. These are just things that's just you memorizing something and it makes it work. It's not really something that I'm finding very enjoyable personally. It's really challenging, and I can really understand why, a lot of people, it's tough. And it's just, that's what it is. There's no shortcuts here. There's no reasoning here. It's really just, are you willing and able to sit behind a computer and go into lab extremely late at night and just keep looking at these things and beating into yourself all these structures, all these landmarks. And so like that is the whole point of school right now, and the bane of my existence is to just take in the next section of material, regurgitate it on an exam, and it's honestly kind of demoralizing and discouraging, and that's the honest truth. And in terms of, I've been thinking a lot about that because like I'm struggling and it's challenging, and I'm glad that today we had anatomy lab because I at least got to talk to some of my peers, and it's a shared sentiment among many of us. So people are really under a lot of stress right now, and I think the key thing is that like if I could restructure things in terms of how the school's doing things, I would do what I've seen other programs do, where you are forcing people into study groups and you're dividing the content into, members of that study group. And I know there's going to be tension between group members and conflicts, and that, some people aren't always going to get along and some people aren't going to teach the way other people want to learn. But dividing up this stuff, because there's just so much stuff you got to learn. Like you need to have someone who dedicates themselves to like anatomy, another person who's dedicated to histology, another person who's dedicated to biochemistry or genetics. Like there's just all these content topics that you got to take in that are just like, even if you became an expert in anatomy, like that's not going to get you to pass the block, because there's all these other things you got to learn. So it's multiples of how much work there was to do as an undergrad, and it's definitely challenging. But in terms of how would I encourage other people to do it, and I'm trying to do it, but it is tough, is to get into groups, like get into a study group of like, I don't know, 4 or 5 people, where you've got enough people where, each one of them, and they're able to like really get good at their subject. And then they're also really good at explaining that subject to other people who, didn't fully understand some part of monogenetic inheritance or something like that. But just, that's how you gotta do this, is like, you gotta have someone step up, form that group, get this thing out of the way, because that's the only way I think that this can really happen. Because individually, yeah, every single kid there, you took the MCAT, you went through the whole med school admission process, you're sharp, you're hardworking, you're smart, but like that's not enough when you're in school. Like you got to be able to work on a team, and a huge part of going to med school is proving that you can work on that team of people and deliver and to collaborate, and to ask your good questions, to think about the material, to encourage your peers. That's to me what is med school really about, is that there's a huge amount of work you're going to have to do. There's a lot of stress, and it's about, what do you do when you're under this much stress? Like, how do you cope? How do you make sure that you're still getting out what you need to get out from a lecture or a lab? It's not simple. And I feel like, personally, I'm working like twice as hard as I've ever had to work every day, 16 hours every day, 8 hours for sleep. among eating and other stuff, but it's just like so much of my day is just school, and there's no weekends. It's like the same thing, but just there's no lectures, but you should be reviewing the lectures and you should be, coming up with study guides and questions and all sort of stuff. So it's just like, it's very, very tough. And I know this is a rant, but it's like, this is what school's like, and I was writing a reflection yesterday, and I was just saying, like, it's really tough to kind of stay in there, and it feels like you're riding a bull basically, and you're just supposed to stay on and stay on, and no matter what happens, you just stay on this bull. It's trying to kick you off and make you think like, I can't do this. I'm gonna give up. I can't do this. It's too much. Just every single day, it's the same thing of just like, oh my God, there's so much stuff you got to do and you got to take in, you got to work, and just like, there's not enough time in a day to keep up with everything, and this just that's how it feels, and it's really tough. And to kind of be here in person, and to meet the people who are also my peers and my colleagues, and to see the same level of like, people want this and they're working really hard for it, and they want other people to get it too. Like, when you're in clinical and medical reasoning class and you've got your partner and you're doing OPP or whatever, like, you're not only helping yourself become a better doctor, like you're working with your partner to help them get better at palpating and figuring out, where's the acromion process, where's the spine of the clavicle, of the scapula. But like, basically it's like, you've just got all these things that like, you're working through it together with somebody, and it's not just yourself who's better because of it, it's also your partner. And so it's like, it's about teamwork. Teamwork is probably the most important thing to come out of med school, and Zoom has made that so much more difficult to do, and virtual classrooms make that so much harder to do, because it's not the same as being there in person and getting to meet people and talk to them, and not just have it be about, the class, but have it be about your social life and what are you doing for fun, and like this other stuff. It's just like, you lose all that stuff with Zoom. It sucks. And so like, it's definitely tough right now to go through this, and I wish we weren't on Zoom. I know we're doing it for safety because the Delta variant's taken off, but it's still an enormous amount of stress, and it's an environment that is not really conducive to building teams, which I think are essential for education in med school, and for what comes out of it, and for any education for that matter. It's like, it's not about you. It's not about what your personal talents and skills are in. It's about how can you have a team of people take something that's extremely complicated and challenging and be able to solve it as a team, because that's how you scale something. Like, it's not the individual anymore, it's the team that matters. And so like, honestly, that's probably the biggest lesson that I'm learning implicitly through school right now, is that it's all about the team. And anatomy is an example where you've just got so many regions of the body. You'll go from superficial back to deep back to occipital triangle to brachial plexus to forearm, anterior, posterior, then to hand. And there's just so many sections and so many things you got to learn about the muscles, the bones, the arteries, the veins, the nerves. What innervates this? You've got two heads of the pronator teres muscle, and for sure, you just got to memorize the fact that the median nerve goes through those two heads, and even though it's got two heads, it's still the same muscle. So it's like, there's just all these things. You just got to memorize it. You got to get someone who's good at explaining it to be there for you. Otherwise, you're not going to remember it, and then it's going to be pinned on an exam, and you're going to be like, no idea what this is, and you're going to take a wild guess, and you're going to be wrong. So, that is what makes school really tough. And I need to eat some lunch. I just got out of lab. I've got a lot of work to do in studying, and I'm trying to figure out how I can form a study group, just on like Facebook or whatever with some people who I'm meeting, and but it's a lot to take in, and it feels like the analogy is, riding a bull or just drowning every day, and you just see the water getting deeper and deeper is how it feels. So it's a lot of stuff. I've never had to, and they say marathon, but it feels like it's a sprint. Every single day is like a sprint, because it's just like, you got to do so much in this day, and there's not enough time. and then you've got the next day. So it's just like, it's a huge amount of work. Like I've never done this much work. And I mean, I don't know if this is good or bad of me to say, but like when I was doing engineering, like it was hard work, but it was rewarding. I enjoyed it. Like I really did enjoy the work of it because it was, um, you're solving real world problems. You're looking at a system that's broken, or you want to develop a new system to build something, or to, you're making something, you're creating something, you're using like this though is just memorization at a new level. And so there's none of this creativity stuff. It's really just, you got to memorize this stuff. And I know that like I think this is, in terms of like the learning curve, in terms of like when do you actually become good at something. And this is like that investment phase of, you got to put in a lot of work and a lot of time, and know that at the end of the day, and they tell us this, and I appreciate them for saying it, but it's like your patients as a doctor are going to appreciate you putting in the work for what you're doing right now. Like, it is work. This is not something that you, I think, naturally are going to enjoy doing. It's work. And so like you put in this immense amount of time and effort and energy into it. And at the end of the tunnel, which is what they keep saying, like you're going to be a better doctor. You're going to be able to help diagnose a patient. Like if you're working in the ER and someone comes in and they've got a gunshot wound, and you know about the brachial plexus, and you know about the arteries and how they basically coalesce, and they form these webs, like you'll know whether or not you need to worry about having to amputate an arm based on where that bullet went through. You're gonna, you're just gonna know these things because you will have had it beat into you through anatomy that like this is what you need to worry about, and you don't have much time. You don't have time to take a, whatever. So it's like you just gotta be there. You gotta see it. You gotta find those landmarks. Just act on it. And so I think that's kind of what is really challenging to do, and they definitely don't give us enough time to do it. And I'll say this too, for me personally, like my dad was a doctor, he was an MD, and I don't fully remember him really talking to me too much about what school really was like for him. I know it's a lot of work, like any school is, it's duh, like you're gonna be doing work, you're paying them money to learn stuff. But I just didn't expect this much volume of work. And the pace are the things that are just kind of like, it's next level stuff. Like it just makes everything else I've done before look like, I was working hard when I was at work, 9 to 5 or after hours. Like I would put in the work, I would get the job done, I would make sure I did the job right. Like, I would have ways of testing myself to make sure that the product I made would actually work. And, I cared about what I did, but it was 9 to 5. This is not 9 to 5. Undergrad also felt like 9 to 5. I know there were late nights before exams and stuff, but but grad school, med school, not 9 to 5. This is like 8 to midnight is what I keep saying. And so that is the thing that's just really hard to adapt to. And also the no weekends part is that other thing. It's just like, I really get frustrated knowing that like I can't go to a beach or just like, just take a day, like at work, like you could take a day, yeah, you just PTO it. It's okay. Just have a little bit more work the next day. This is not that. This is like, you don't really get any time off because you have this exam coming up and you've got an exam after that, and you've got an exam after that. And it's all in the same week, so you don't really get to just sit there and be like, I'm gonna kick it. It's like, no, though. So it's tough. This is definitely a long one. I'm sorry for ranting, but I just wanted to get out what I've been thinking. And it's a lot. And yeah, well, thank you all for watching. If you're still, if you made it this far. All of this on top of moving, by the way. It's like, for me, that was a huge personal thing of like moving out of the Bay Area, because I've grown up in the Bay Area my whole life. So it's like a complete change of everything, just the whole world. It's a different world. People are different, the places are different, the weather's different. And so it's like you're in this new world and you've got this workload that's consuming basically your whole life. So it's kind of like you don't even get to process a lot of the other things that go on in your life. And so it's really intense. But yeah, I'm gonna end things there just so I don't say anything I shouldn't. But yeah, it's another day in paradise is what I keep saying. So, all right, I'll talk to you guys later, and I hope everyone's doing well.